Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. I'm just trying to find here something that I need for the program today. Just lost it. Oh gosh. Just a second. Okay. So nice to have you in this program, HerStory, our monthly edition, August 2024. We are very happy to have the chance of holding this program this evening. And we have a very special guest to all of us, Tina Lindhard. I would like to introduce Tina, and I will start right now saying that Tina's fascination with consciousness and its relationship to peace started very early. After getting her first degree in psychology and sociology at the University of Cape Town, South Africa, she left university and began a search that came to an end 20 years ago when she met the philosopher and yogi Srinivas Arka. She learned his method of meditation known as Arka Dhyana, or intuitive meditation, and combined this inner investigation with an MA, a Master in Transpersonal Psychology at the University of Sofia in California, and a PhD in psychology on consciousness studies in Hawaii, where she now mentors masters and PhD students. In an attempt to bring a more spiritual perspective into science and the community, she teaches and researches heart-based meditation methods. I think we would find this very, very interesting, as the Women's Federation is so concerned with developing heart relationships and a heart approach to life. She has written about many topics, including the spirituality of Paleolithic women. Tina is the president of SICA Spain and also chair of the consciousness research for the foundation of SICA International. SICA are the initials, the Spanish initials for International Dialogues about the Brain and Aggression. She was happily married to Jesus Martin Ramirez, a neuroscientist and a professor with a PhD in medicine and surgery, who passed away, I hope I'm right, Tina, 2 years ago or almost 2 years ago. Tina and I have known each other for quite many years, and our relationship started through her husband. Tina has always shown a desire to develop her spirituality in a modelic way, which she did. This is my impression. At a certain point in her life, she felt she wanted to contribute more at a social level. And it was then when she searched to have a social impact by finding a way to communicate about her knowledge, finds, and experiences related to consciousness and spirituality, which she is doing now. I'm sure she will touch our hearts and minds with what she's going to share this evening. So thank you, Tina, for having accepted our invitation. And I would like to say that the floor is yours.
First of all, Marcia, thank you for your kind words. And thank you for the Women Federation for World Peace for this opportunity to talk with you. I haven't planned anything specifically, and I thought I'd just let it unfold and see where we go, because consciousness as a study is really quite interesting. Not quite interesting, very interesting. When I first became interested in consciousness studies was when I was at the University of Cape Town. But I think I want to go back a little bit in my history. I was born in South Africa, and I was born on a small farm, and it was really, really quite idyllic because we had cows and I had the horses and we had chickens. And what was unusual was that in the farm next door, we had a Black family living. Now, because of the apartheid system in Cape Town, Blacks really couldn't live in Cape Town as a family. They had to come in as migrant laborers. So having a Black family next door, and they were our closest contact because we were quite far out of the village. I was able, well, what I loved doing was just crossing the fence and going down and playing with the little Black children. But even more than that, was sitting with the elderly man. They'd light a fire in a metal can, and they'd sit there just smoking their pipes. And they loved children, and I used to just sit with them. And it wasn't until years later that I discovered their state of consciousness, because generally we as the white tribe, we're always doing, but we're not being. And there's a great difference between doing and being. And when you can really just be, and I'll explain this just now, something happens to your consciousness and one feels peace. So I used to go down there and just sit there. And I knew I was experiencing something very different to maybe what I was feeling at home. And that's not to criticize my parents. With all my heart, I thank them for the education they gave me. But it's also an indication of when you're working with indigenous people, they actually come from a different level of our consciousness. So now I fast forward, and then when I went to university, I decided I would study consciousness. And I was interested in drugs, dreams, death, and meditation. And when I was about to start my master's, it suddenly occurred to me, hey, but if you know nothing about consciousness from experience, how could I ask anybody a question? Because I wouldn't know what to ask. So then I left university, and my quest for discovering more about my own consciousness started. But it was also, I left South Africa also for political reasons. And it wasn't a full-time quest. It wasn't really a directed quest. And I didn't have a guide. So eventually, many years later, after having multiple miscarriages and being given medical drugs, I began to have different experiencing consciousness, which at the time I found incredibly frightening, because when you explore your consciousness and when you either take drugs, and medical drugs are also a drug, you can change your levels of consciousness and you can be thrown into a world you know nothing about, which was my case. But the one thing that did occur after this is I decided I really must begin the inner quest very seriously. So because I got to the state that I really was, well, eventually I went to the mountains because I felt the magnetic field in the mountains or the sea would sort me out. And I refused to take any more of the medications they were giving me. And slowly I got myself right again. But that's when I decided I really had to start knowing more about human consciousness, but from the inside out. And somebody gave me the Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying, which I read with great interest. And in the book, it said there was going to be a course on how to help people dying in about 10 days in London. And I said to my husband, you know, I just feel I have to go, because in this book, they're describing states that I experienced, which are known as the Bardo states. So off I go to London. And while I'm on this, well, there was a course first on meditation, which I thought I'd do. And then there was this course on helping people in the dying process. So I was more interested in the second course at that stage. But as they showed us the meditation method, which was an open-eyed method, I began getting visions. And in the group, the more senior people said, no, that's just movement of your minds, because most Buddhist-based methods are mind-based, you know, and it's not important. But I just felt that I was being guided in some sort of way. And after my experience with the medical drugs, I got to the state I had to listen to what I felt was the right thing to do. Other people thought was the right thing. And when they're finished, two people said to me, oh, we've known you in another life. So I said, okay, you know. And they both asked me to stay with them, and I went with one. And I described this vision I was having every time I sat and meditated. And she said, oh, I know that person. And I said, that's strange, because another friend of mine had visited me. And she had said that the person, because I could describe the person who was coming in these visions. And she said, no, she was sure it was her teacher, or Muktananda of the Cedar Line, who used to scream at people to wake up. And I felt that, okay, Muktananda is having a go at me to wake me up. And so when I went to stay with this other person, and she said, oh, I know that person, because I said I could really right to every hair on his head. She said, we'll phone him up. So we phone this person up, and I take the phone and I say, look, I was in this Buddhist retreat, and there's somebody screaming at me every time I meditate. And my one friend said it was Muktananda, and now this friend I'm staying with says it's you. So he says, well, what your friend doesn't know, I'm a Swami, and I live with Muktananda. So he said, you've got to come to my house now. So I thought, well, you know, after my experiences with it was actually Prozac, well, I'm open to anything. So I go to his house, and when he comes, he looks at me and he says, you've come to London to meet somebody who's coming to my flat tonight. And I said, no, I come to do a course on death and dying. He said, no, no, no. I said, come with me. And he was actually the split image of the person I was seeing in meditation. And we went to his meditation room, and he put in a video. And I looked at it and I said, you're quite right. I've come to meet that person. It just sort of came out of me. And then he actually started taking me to health food bars and giving me a lot of vegetarian protein. I didn't know why at that stage, and I felt this is really strange. You know, you say you're going to meet somebody, and then somebody sort of like almost fattening you up for something or another. And well, that night began gathering in his meditation room. And there were people in saris, and several people who were accidentals as well. And this person came in, and I went into a trance. And I had the most incredible experience I've ever had in my life. And that was Srinivas Arka. And when he invited us to go and speak to him, and I said, no, if he does this for me at this distance, I'm not going closer. And the Swami who'd introduced me, he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, Tina, that's ego. And I crawled across the floor. And then when I came back, he said, now you're going to have to find your way to that state by yourself. And I'm still trying. I know more about that state I arrived, but I'm still trying. I did in mind. I saw Arka again, and once that weekend, and when I got to Spain, I wrote a letter saying, please come. I want other people to experience the state I'd experienced. So 2 years later, he came to Spain. Now, as I said, some meditation methods, and especially like mindfulness, and which does come out of a Buddhist meditation, and it's not right or wrong, it's just different. It's more working with the mind, whereas the method that Arka teaches is a heart-paced method. So it's a way to get from your thinking mind, first of all, down to your heart. And I'd like to just share just a gesture with you now, because if we all start coming from heart consciousness now, the whole so I'm going to deal with it where you can put where you think your thinking mind is, yeah, if you like, and you can close your eyes and I'll just guide you into your hearts. So we can close our eyes and just put our attention on the breath. And we can bring our hand to where we think our thinking mind is, which we normally associate with the brain. And very slowly lowering our hand, we follow the gesture with our closed eyes, inviting our mind. Mind, come with me. We're going to go on a journey. At our upper chest, we can launch whatever intention we like, but it can be like to discover our true essence, or self. And just expand into that state of being that opens when we're in the heart. Okay. And when you like, you can open your eyes. Mm-hmm. When we're in our thinking mind, we're often bombarded with thoughts. But when we can return to hearts, we enter into a feeling-based consciousness. We can start experiencing what the other experiences. And women in general are closer to their hearts because you've got to receive information intuitively. Now, when we're born, babies are in their hearts. They haven't developed a thinking mind. And it doesn't mean that when you you don't experience you, and you do communicate. A baby will cry if it's unhappy, and it'll smile when it's happy. But also, the mother has to know what the baby wants. And it's through this connection from heart to heart that she can decipher what her child needs. So in one way, this is so much easier for women because they haven't undergone 2,000 years of training to develop this highly intellectual mind, which most people have got in the West these days. When, as a meditation teacher, I always find people who come from less developed countries go into their hearts straight away because they haven't got years of their ancestors being indoctrinated and only being in their minds. Now, what's the advantage of being in your heart? Well, there are many, because it's an experiencing consciousness. And experiencing consciousness is very different from a thinking consciousness. Let me, we have the five senses. If I give each of you a strawberry, you'll all have a different experience with that strawberry. Some people might say it's sweet, some people might say it's sour, because you'll only experience a strawberry when you chew on it and go, and you get the juice in your mouth and you actually have an experience. But the heart, too, is a sensory organ, and that science has discovered. So it's the most primitive sensory organ, in the embryological stage. It's the first organ to develop when you're an embryo. And it also creates the biggest electric magnetic field. And as you start interacting with people, in fact, your fields start communicating. And as your sensitivity increases, you're getting information all the time, but it doesn't enter through here, it enters through feelings. So Srinivas Arka teaches this feeling-based method of meditation, which will take you from the thinking mind to the subliminal mind. And normally people, I find when I teach them meditation, they start having much more vivid dreams, because the way your soul can interact with you is also through dreams. You'll generally be picking up information during the day, but because you're not paying attention, often that information is not available to your conscious awareness. But in your dreams, you can get that information as you go into the more astral levels in the dream process. But beyond the feeling level, you go into what Arka identifies as the emotional level. Now, there is also, first of all, which I work with quite a lot with, is the messy emotional level, because as you travel from here to here, it seems such a little distance, but all your emotions that have not been processed in your life, that you haven't integrated, will start coming to the fore. So you've got to deal with your messy emotions first. But once you get into your heart space and you're feeling, then you can go into the emotional level. And the importance of this is because this meditation is about love. And you can't be truly spiritual without you being emotional, because it's impossible. You can say that I love you with your mind, but unless you involve your feelings with what you say, you're not going to be able to express yourself very well, either to your loved ones or maybe to your relationship to the higher being, without implicating your heart and your feelings, you're not going to start experiencing these very deep levels of consciousness. And then from that level of emotional consciousness, then you're taken into your soul consciousness, which you might start clarifying your identity more of who you really are. And from there, you'll go into pure consciousness. So I haven't seen in science it expressed quite like this, because most of the research is done on mindfulness meditations. And that's more about just being a witnessing conscious, but it's not about being a participatory in this incredible universe we live in, which to me is all a manifestation and manifesting of this divine being, which many of us will call God. In fact, you can see it as the body of God, or the body of the higher soul. And once you start realizing this, you can start living in a different way, because everything is divine, including all of you. You're all sparks of the divine. We all start sparks of the divine. And if we can start realizing this and living with that understanding, we're going to choose to live very differently on this planet. Before we go and chop down that tree, we realize it too is a living being. And indigenous cultures lived from this understanding. It's us who start seeing an economic worth in that tree, or an economic worth in the earth. But really, the earth too is a living being. And in a way, she's our mother, because she is who gives us so many wonderful gifts. So the more we can explore the consciousness, the more we take in to be a certain way we live out and show up on this planet. So there are levels of consciousness and there's states of consciousness. Now, science knows a lot about states of consciousness, because you can put electrodes on the head and you can measure beta, alpha, theta, and delta consciousness, and that they're quite comfortable with. But unless you've experienced the difference between your thinking mind and your feeling heart mind, most people in science don't know what I'm talking about. You know, they can say Lindhard says this, but I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in that you knowing that in yourself, you've got these deeper levels of consciousness that you can experience. Because without the experience, all this is dry words. And the joy of the experience is not there, because the joy of the experience of feeling, it's like the joy, but much, much greater than the strawberry. If you just know what the chemical compounds of a strawberry are, it's not the experience. Well, the same with your consciousness. Until you actually get into your feeling heart, you don't know the joy of a feeling heart consciousness. And this is when I'm talking as a scientist. Well, let me just, I was invited, because I sometimes talk on embryology. For me, it was very interesting. In like with near-death experiences, people are now talking about states of consciousness when people leave the body or in a near-death experience. But very few scientists are investigating when soul comes into the body. And I have the great fortune of having had some courses with Jaap van der Wal, who's an embryologist, who teaches embryology, very much influenced by Steiner. And he tells the most incredible story of the development of the embryo, which goes through the mineral phase, which goes through the plant phase, which goes through the animal phase, which becomes the human phase. And I'm not going to go into that now, but sometimes I talk of this in conferences. And I was in a conference invited as a keynote speaker in Italy. And it was a long conference, a SAN conference. And the day before, somebody had stood up and talked about the new vision for the world. And he talked about transhumanism and how, you know, we could be leaving this planet, how we could have children artificially. I'm not talking about just artificial insemination, but artificial wombs, and about all the wonders of AI. And I sat there and listened, and I thought, this is not my vision for the world. This isn't what I want for the world. And I was due to talk the next day. And I asked the organizers if I could change my talk slightly and address the points he'd brought up the day before. And the woman who had collected me, she said, Tina, not only you must ask, but you must do it, because women are the guardians of life. And really, we are the guardians of life. And I talked on this, and every point that he'd made, I knocked and I said, that isn't my vision for the future. And I think we're here to live in harmony with nature. We're not here to control nature. We're not here to mess up this planet and go to another planet. Women don't want to be substituted by artificial wombs. We want to have a relationship with our baby. That baby's having a relationship with us from the very moment of conception. It doesn't become a human being. It is a human being from our very moment that it's of conception. And it's beautiful. And we're doing everything to destroy it. And well, I said, actually 250 stood up and applauded. This was before COVID. And this was the start of me writing now a series of articles, which I call my social activist stage, because I'm really deeply concerned about where humanity is going. Okay. So I think it's only now spirituality getting back to our heart, getting back to our human beings who really deeply care for nature and for each other. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Tina. So let's give a hand to Tina. Such a beautiful, so beautiful words, I would like to say. And this idea of bringing yourself to the heart is very necessary, I find, in our world. We need somehow to become more contemplative of ourselves and of others and of what is around us, so that we have time to connect, because we are all in a rush and we are doing our things, and we don't have this time, you know, even if we wish, we are just rushing here and there. And I find this so necessary. And also your idea of protecting nature, protecting women, and protecting women's wombs. I think this is its role in life. I think all this is so necessary. And I thank you for being involved in this effort. I know you are organizing conferences and programs to share. So you have gone a process, more individual process to a more social, as I said when I introduced you. And I can see it very clearly. You're making an effort now to have more impact on society and see if we can altogether contribute to bring this world to a nicer pace, to a more natural pace. And I thank you for that. I think this is a great and important work that you are doing. So thank you. And I would like to open the floor for you, for all of you who are here in this call, to address Tina and ask your questions. Make your questions straight, not too long. And also, I also have a few questions, but I'll ask them later because just want to say I attended one of your programs related to death, consciousness and death. And I thought that was very interesting, and I would like to ask you a question about that. And also about dignity. Dignity is a concept and even a project of ours. And we think it's very, very important to develop in our lives that sense of dignity of who we are and what we can be. So yes, but that is later on. I would like to open the floor for all of you who are here, and I'm sure you would have some questions to Tina. Little by little, I know people get warmed up, Tina.
I have a question.
Okay. I recognize that voice. I haven't seen you, but you are here, Sebastian.
Yes, I am. And I'm not too far from Tina because we are kind of neighbors
Okay.
in nearby villages. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Tina. It was beautiful to hear you and to feel you. I have a question because we know there's a relationship between conscience and consciousness. I would like to know your perspective on that, because we know they're different, but we know they're related. So how is your approach to that? You know, what is the relationship, if there are any, or difference or whatever, between conscience and consciousness? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sebastian. That's a good question. So when we're talking about consciousness, especially from the point of view when you're talking about heart consciousness, it's a different level to your consciousness. And you amazingly said you could feel me. So you were actually resonating from the heart consciousness, which is an experience. So we've got these different levels of consciousness available to us. You know, science at the moment thinks that consciousness is a product of the brain. But once you get into these different levels of experiencing consciousness, it's got nothing to do with the brain. It's got much more to do with the heart. Yeah. So the different levels of consciousness is an inner exploration that you can start. You can find your way naturally, or you can use a method like I teach, but also the very old method called prayer of the heart will get you to the same place. Your conscience is sometimes what you've been trained, like your superego. But I also think as you refine your exploration of your inner feeling world, where intuition starts kicking in more, that almost becomes a replacement to the superego consciousness, and your conscience starts giving you information which you don't know where it comes from. But generally, scientifically, the scientific thing of conscience is more to do with like the superego of what you've been trained is right and wrong and that. But I think personally that once you're exploring, and this deep respect happens naturally for other living beings, you don't need any list of criteria of how you should act in the world, because you really can't do to another what you can't do to yourself. So if you're living from feeling consciousness, the boomerang is straight away. And if you hurt another, you feel that hurt in yourself. So you're guided by your inner experience, not only your inner voice. Does that sort of answer it, Sebastian?
Yes, very much so. I think in the Spanish language, it's like conscience relates more to a kind of moral standard,
Yeah.
or how do you distinguish good and wrong? But consciousness, to me, appeals to a more, like you say, a more spiritual thing, a more soul thing. So I think maybe that's what you're saying. It's deeper in a way.
Yeah, it's a discovery of your true identity, So you can be told you're a soul and you might feel it, but until you actually have got that full clarity, because it's the full clarity that helps you also in the dying process. I know Matthew's going to ask this question later, but once you're sure of your identity, the fear of the dying process stops, because the soul is eternal. It's connected to the eternal. And so who really dies? We might have to leave our body, but who dies? And so once you've done this exploration, most people's fear of death just falls away. And there's some beautiful poems by Rumi about this. I died to a mineral and became a plant. I died to a plant and I became an animal. I died to an animal and became a human. So why fear death? On the wings of angels, I will float in my future life. I maybe got the end of it wrong, but it's what he meant. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And let's see if there is any other question coming in. I cannot see everybody because I have you showing. So maybe if
Marcia,
anybody...
can I say something?
Yes,
May I say
please.
something? Yes.
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much, Tina, for your talk. I'm sorry I had a phone call that came while you were doing this meditation. I just wanted to tell a kind of a funny story. My husband, in the late 60s, began to do yoga. I live in Freiburg and Breisgau, and he would go up into the Black Forest and they would do yoga watching the sun come up. And it was really an amazing experience for him. And then he was doing, I think, for 18 months. And then the teacher went to Switzerland and then he had to stop. But anyway, I came to be with him in 88 and end of 88. And I would say this was just after I came, maybe in February or March of 89. And he turned to me and said, yeah, this man is really wonderful. His name is Yogi Canada. And I thought, Yogi Canada, who are you talking about? Yogi Canada. He was talking about Yogacananda. But he always had this in his mind. But we have many books from Yogi Canada, from Yogacananda, and also other books that he had then from the late 60s that he was he was working with yoga. Yeah. But I thought I'd tell this funny story.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful story. And yes, there all the yogis come at a different time in space, particularly for what people need at that moment. For me, Jesus Christ was also a yogi, and maybe to make people realize there was a different possibilities in the world. He did healing. I think the yogi I work with now, we've become so mental, so incredibly mental, our society. And this guide down to our heart helps us remember that level of consciousness. You know, it's not something new. I mean, to me, ontologically and phylogenetically, we were here before we were here. And that brings me, what I didn't talk about in the talk was women's consciousness. And
Oh.
I investigated quite a lot of Paleolithic women's spirituality, bringing in the Rupestrian artwork, especially in Spain. Now, this really woken me up to the difference between women's consciousness and man's consciousness, because women's consciousness, because of our bodies and menstruation, we are connected to the moon. You know, in a tribe, we'd all menstruate together. It was known as the moon cycle. And there was no doubt to us that there was a relationship between us, our experiences, and the outer nature, because of that's the way we're made. So women, when it was in the matrifocal age, lived in an interconnected universe. It was as natural to us as having a female body. But then when the patriarchal era came in, and, you know, of course, the intellectual mind consciousness, you know, ancient Greek started to develop, and it's taken them 2,000 years in quantum physics to come to the conclusion we live in an interconnected universe.
Yeah.
I mean, this is woman's gift, because we you know, we don't have to have somebody teach us. You just have to be a little bit observant of when you menstruate, connect to the moon. I mean, we are lunar, and women are water people, and we are emotional people, and that is our nature. You know, instead of looking at it as something horrible or something that, once we can work with emotions and get through that and really develop emotions in the full sense, it becomes a real wonderful gift of women. And you know, that again, this modern trend that we're all the same, we're not. A woman has a different consciousness to a man's consciousness, and they're not good nor bad. They're different, and they're complementary, and they can try as much as they like, but women are not men and men are not women. Sorry, that's it. We come in a certain form, and we've got to celebrate the form we come in. Yeah.
That's right, Tina. I would like to review the question coming from someone you know, and that's Guille Fernandez. Yes, you know him, right? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So his question is related to how to stay stable in your heart and consciousness when the environment is aggressive and or confusing your feelings, hopes, etc.
Very good. Very, very good.
Well, you know, wherever we've started, we've spent many years training our intellectual mind. To actually train our mind to come back to the heart takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. You know, maybe even with just that little exercise we did, you could begin to experience there's something different about this consciousness to this consciousness. When I was teaching in India to little kids at a school, and I love the Indian schools, you know, they're very poor in the countryside, but they're all sitting on the floor, and they're different age groups, and they've got their hair braided, and there's jasmine in them and that. And I showed them this, and I said, would anybody like to share their experiences afterwards? And this little boy, miss. So I said, you know, it's with a translator. So I said, yeah, what happened? So he said, my mind went away. And that's really what happens when you can get into feeling. And the more you train yourself, and it's just, you know, you, even just washing dishes, you can go mind to heart straight away. You can do everything, just 1 second, mind to heart, and start experiencing that level of consciousness. And eventually it becomes a habit again that you can be there. Now, yes, what happens when we get to heart consciousness, and this is some of the scientific research. I worked with heart math equipment, and it's not only the Arka Dhyana method, but when you move from the mind to the heart, everything comes into coherence. What does that mean? It means that all your organs operate as a unified whole. When we're here, we're normally in a state of consciousness, which is very busy. But when we come down, we start going into alpha, and we can go into deeper theta states. And that will bring all the organs in the body in coherence, and they know this by a heart rate variability, that there's a tremendous change. But not only that, once you start coming down to the heart level of consciousness, you start synchronizing with earth consciousness. And we start bringing the whole thing into a unified whole. So if you can be in that level of consciousness, and for instance, you're going to a job interview or something like that, and if you do this beforehand, I assure you that interview will turn out differently, because once you develop a very powerful, once you really are in your heart again, you can pull other people into their heart. It's not you pulling, it's not me, my ego pulling, but that state of consciousness, that state of unity between all your organs, and then the state of unity between you and the planet, actually creates a field that will pull people into that state. So it's not you, I, ego, who's doing it, but it's the state of all those things that come into synchronicity, come into there. Yes. We start having be projected on, we can start having people who, even when you go like this, will have emotional experiences that are not cleared up, and they'll fire. And yes, that's when you really need to be firmly in your heart and not retaliating to the other, and say, hey, yeah, I can see a part of you is angry, and it's okay, but it's only a part. And then you can help them to be with that part. Because I work as a therapist, we've actually made all these parts something negative. So you should never be angry. You're spiritual. You should never be angry. But yes, you feel anger. But if we recognize it as a part of us, we're human beings. We have a part that's angry. We have a part that's fearful. We have a part that's confused. Once we can accept those parts as part of our being, they lose their force because they're not in the shadow. So yes, if a child gets angry, I would say, hey, yeah, I can see there's a part of you that's angry. That's okay. Maybe you want to go to your room and tell you it's past. But the mother that goes, you shouldn't be angry, is only going to make it a shadow feature. So yes, coming from the heart, you recognize it as parts, and you take the heat off it. And I'm sure there wouldn't be so many interruptions or eruptions of anger when people do terrible things to other people, because they've got it in their shadow personality. So thank you for that question. It's a good one. Marcia, I can't hear you. You've got your...
Yeah, I'm sorry. I muted myself because I have the bells of the church ringing. No, you say it a different. What do you say?
Yeah, they're tolling. They're tolling. Yeah,
tolling,
but ringing is also very...
Yeah, you have the bells tolling. It's beautiful, but then all of you could hear as well. Anyways, I don't remember. I just thanked you for giving this such deep explanation to help us calm down a little bit and accept others in whatever they feel and help each other to correct whatever needs to be corrected. Anyways, yeah, basically I wanted to say this. I would like to actually, I have two possible, we have 5 minutes to go. And I have two possible comments. They are related to content that you shared, some here, but basically I've been reading your material and you said something about the term dignity. And you said that it had a moral connotation, but it was referred to the natural order of things. And from this perspective, natural order of things, the dignity of death suggests that that is worthy of respect. And it is part of the natural order of things and so on, and has merit. But when the United Nations ratified the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the understanding of the word dignity, it seems it changed and became a more codified and officially took on a moralizing and political aspect, which implied sameness. Everybody is the same in their process of death, something like that. So could you explain that a little bit, because it has to do with consciousness? And if we have time, then I'll ask the second question.
Marcia, I think the question, but I think when you look at death as having its own dignity, as having its own order in life, it makes you reflect how you're going to show up in life. You know, are you going to make your life worthwhile? Or are you going to waste your time, you know, while you're here and not try to do anything either for another person, for society? I think when we can actually be with death, it gives meaning to life. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we've always, well, before death was, we're all the same. We never all die the same. And we never all going to die the same. I had the great privilege of accompanying my husband on his journey. And because he was so religious, and he also became much more spiritual. And in fact, the priest said he found his director. You know, in yoga, we'll say we found our guru, our inner guiding voice, which the outer teacher, you first see reflected there, and then it's the inside. And in the Christian tradition, the priest explained to me, they talked about the director, and he did. I mean, he knew he arrived at such a high state of consciousness, and he said, tomorrow I go. I mean, he knew tomorrow the next day he would leave his body. And he died with full consciousness, but also with absolutely no fear, because he knew it was a transition from this realm of being to another realm of being. And he also, when you accept that, you can be with others, you can thank them, you can share these moments that you've still got left together. Not fear, not yes, I think the person who's accompanying somebody dying has more challenges than actually the dying person, because the dying person really has got very little choice in the matter. But the person who's accompanying has to do a lot of inner work, so you're not projecting your own alleged suffering on the other. So I think hiding death from society and making it something that is not an experience, but something to be feared, is doing a lot of harm. I also think that the inclination now is just on, and you know, Spain also has introduced euthanasia, which as you know, is part of what people try to entice my husband, not entice my husband, enticed me to accept. And I said, no ways. For me, death is a natural process, and it's a beautiful process. And the more we can live that, the more it'll influence our next state of being. I said, yes, I do have a next state of being. I'm not just a material person. So we've got to remember, we've hidden spirituality also from the dying process, and we're just seeing it through eyes. But a person who's spiritual can, with a body that's living, but they can overcome many of the very low vital signs and still be living a highly dignified life, because they're coming from a spiritual consciousness. And I said, my husband taught me so much. And as I said, it was a beautiful process, a challenging process, and also a very feeling process that I lived with him. Yeah, and that's hence the conference afterwards, the dignity of death, because what's happening, like in countries like Canada with MAID, where they're trying to entice people to actually undergo euthanasia. And this is the Western idea. What you do counts, but what your being doesn't count. But once you change that, it's your being that adds to the universe, not all your degrees, not your amount of money, not your material worth, but your being as a human being. And I look at little kids with Down, and they're in their heart. They teach us so much, and they're just being, but they haven't got, why can't we see people like that again? Yeah. And they're very important because they teach people to love.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you so much for these last words of yours. And I'm sure that all this reflection with you during this hour will lead us this evening to a better evening and maybe to a better night of rest. And I hope to become more conscientious and full of consciousness about who you are, or who we are, and what we are doing here in this world. Thank you so much for being with us. And we have come up to the end of our time here. I don't know if there is any last comment coming from you, Miti, for example. Would you like to do that?
I would. Thank you so much, Tina. That was so heartfelt and so full of wisdom and experience and so touching. It wasn't just like an intellectual discussion, but it was full of depth and very important words that you shared with us, because we all encounter these experiences and we're all fighting up within our inner self and trying to find that real goodness that you were talking about. So I'm really, really grateful that you could be with us and share your incredible knowledge, actually, and also your heart. And thank you for sharing so many of your personal experiences as well. It means so much. And I'm very, very much looking forward to meeting you in Poland. And so thank you so much. And yeah, I think I just felt, I need to connect to you more after that talk. I mean, I've seen you, we've been like passing sometimes here and there, but to stop and take that time just to listen from another person's perspective is so important. Thank you so much. It means so much to me, and I'm sure to everyone who is here. Thank you.
Thank you, Missy. Thank you very much.
And just as a final note, maybe for everybody who is here, we are having our yearly conference in Poland in November. So you are very welcome to get informed about it, and who knows, join us there. It's open to men. Sebastian, I'm seeing you. You can come if you like. and
Thank you. Thank you.
share with women. It's going to be an important conference. So having said that, I would like to give you good evening and thank you for being together with us. Thank you, Tina, once again. And well, all the best.
Thank
Let's
you.
be better people.
Thank you,
Thank you
Marcia.
very much. Yeah.
Thank you,
And
Marcia.
Tina.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening. Thank you.
And thanks you all of you. for being-
Thank you very
you.
much, Tina. Thank you for. Thank you.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
my voice today doesn't come out.
Oh, you need some rest, Arka. It's nice to
Yeah,
see you.
yeah.
Thank you, Tina.
Oh, I know that voice as well.
Yeah, from Ireland. Sending you love.
Amanda.
Hello, Tina. My cup
Everyone,
is
that's lovely.
overflowing, overflowing.
See you
I-
all in Poland. Bye. Good night. Good night.
Good night, Anne. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Tina. Also, greetings from Finland.
Yes.
Bye.
Hi, Phoebe.
See you in Poland.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you from Austria.
Bye-bye.
Mm.
Thank you all. Thank you.
And thank you, Marcia, for organizing this.
Oh, definitely. My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Good night.
Good night.